If you like the work I do, consider supporting me on Patreon for about the price of a cup of coffee. Okay, well, the largest tier is about the price of a Starbucks Frappuccino. Maybe even less, depends on your Frappuccino. And you will basically be paying for my endless supply of news subscriptions that I've accumulated over me doing this climate recap, and also buying new equipment that sometimes because things fail. And in exchange, of course, you will get early access to my deep dives, and you'll be able to vote on deep dive topics and also hear a bit more about me. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, go ahead and click the link below to check out my Patreon. Hey y'all, it's Becky here from the Beckosphere, where we talk about climate change news and solutions. You have entered the weekly climate recap, where we look into what is being done to prepare for and reduce the impacts of climate change. Notice that I did not say to adapt and mitigate, because that is climate change jargon. We'll get more into that at the end of the video. Anyways, today we are going to talk about the climate news from September 2nd to 9th. If you see me looking down this direction, my iPad is here. I guess I'll try to keep it higher up so you can see it's here. And that is because I need to read off of it. Actually, I'm going to reduce it a little bit. Sorry, it makes the lighting weird. But anyways, let's get right into the news. A report by DNV concludes that we have basically missed our opportunity to use COVID as a jumping off point to majorly reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. Quote, "From an energy transition perspective, the pandemic has been a lost opportunity. Recovery packages have largely focused on protecting rather than transforming existing industries." Sad, but honestly not that surprising if you follow this channel. Their prediction kind of represents a business as usual and is not even close to hitting the Paris Climate Agreement. Basically, we need to make a lot of changes so that we can kind of prove their projection wrong. We have to. The National Interagency Fire Center predicts above potential for wildfires in the northwestern U.S. this September, and this does include Hawaii. So if you live in those parts, I do recommend going ahead and getting an emergency kit and making an emergency plan to prep. An article by Gizmodo found that the utility company Entergy, which owns infrastructure that fell into the Mississippi River after Hurricane Ida, is causing basically New Orleans to have major blackouts. Well, that company basically has known that their infrastructure would not hold up to extreme weather events that were being worsened by climate change, but chose to do nothing. Entergy has known for decades, including longer than almost any of the general public who are suffering through Ida and its aftermath, that burning fossil fuels causes climate change, that climate change causes extreme weather, and that these effects would create vulnerabilities for the electric grid. Despite that knowledge, Entergy has used deception, bullying, and political power only available to monopolies to continue burning fossil fuels and to delay or kill efforts that might have made its customers become more resilient to climate change. Entergy announced that it plans to hit net zero by 2050, but since then has increased its natural gas supply. They also decreased the effectiveness of their plan that would have brought excess energy created by community solar onto the grid. And allegedly, they've even hired actors to show up to a 2018 city council meeting to support a new gas plant in New Orleans. Honestly, this is all really reminding me what is kind of happening right now with SoCal Energy in Southern California. I think Gizmodo put it right when they basically said that while we've been trying to hold fossil fuel companies accountable for lying, we also need to scrutinize utility companies for their inaction too. Meanwhile, the government has already authorized the U.S.'s emergency oil reserve to loan 1.5 million barrels of crude oil to an ExxonMobil refinery in Louisiana to relieve fossil fuel disruptions from the hurricane, helping fossil fuel companies quickly get back on their feet. And also for those who need to access fuel to be able to access it too. Nearly 2,000 chemical spills and other similar things coming from petrochemical and fossil fuel sites and connected to the hurricane have been reported in Louisiana. 350 of those oil spills are in the Gulf of Mexico. There is also currently an oil spill 2 miles off the coast, which seems to have come from abandoned pipelines. Fossil fuel companies, clean up your shit. The process of shutting down factories, like what had to be done before Hurricane Ida hit, can significantly add to air pollution and the areas surrounding, because it usually involves flaring, which is basically when companies burn off methane and other chemicals, and in this case, release black carbon. The UK is investing $1.2 billion for public and private investments in clean energy projects in India. The country's also launched the Climate Finance Leadership Initiative, or CF. My light just died. Okay, we're back. Now I'm using a lamp over there. Honestly, kind of looks about the same. What do you guys think? So, the UK is investing $1.2 billion for public and private investment in clean energy projects in India. The countries have also launched the Climate Finance Leadership Initiative, or CFLI, India Partnership. This will help mobilize private capital to sustainable infrastructure in India. The CFLI will also be chaired by Michael Bloomberg, UN Special Envoy on Climate Ambition and Solutions. I forgot he was that. Disparity in vaccine rollout might impact attendance of the COP26 in November. The UK promised developing countries' delegates vaccines, but several have not received both doses, and there's only 2 months left to write this. Activists are worried that this will result in important voices for the global south being excluded from talks. After hearing these concerns, the UK said that it has now contacted every unvaccinated delegate to schedule appointments for them. But meanwhile, several activist organizations argue to push back on COP26 until vaccines can be properly rolled out. While several activist organizations argue to push back COP26 until vaccines can properly be rolled out, the most vulnerable countries to climate change are actually really wanting the whole thing to go forward. They have formed the Climate Vulnerability Forum, or CVF, an emergency pact to tackle rising temperatures. The CVF represents 1.2 billion people from Africa, the Caribbean, Latin America, and the Pacific, and they insist on COP26 not being postponed despite inequity. They're still waiting for the $100 billion promised by developed countries to aid their green transitions from 2020 to 2024. It was already supposed to have started happening, but they still don't have the money for it. Desmog reports that the UK government appointed DLA Piper to be the COP26 legal service provider. The problem is, DLA Piper holds clients such as Shell, ExxonMobil, and BP, and has gotten them out of legal troubles during oil spills. They also defended Occidental Chemicals corporations for burying toxic waste in the Love Canal in 1989, which caused the water to catch on fire. When asked, about this interesting choice of policy personnel, the COP26 spokesperson didn't address the DLA Piper's client list, but said this, quote, DLA Piper is providing value-in-kind legal services. There is no cost to COP26 or the taxpayer. All organizations supporting COP26 have met a robust criteria, which includes making net zero commitments with a credible action plan to achieve this, independently verified through a science-based targets initiative. They have also joined the Race to Zero, which requires them to set credible action plans for reducing their emissions in line with the goals of the Paris Agreement. A new study by the UN World Meteorological Organization, or WMO, finds that weather disasters are happening 4 to 5 times more often than they did in the 1970s, from 700 to 3,500 a year. Disasters are killing less people than they used to, but are causing 7 times more damage. Now, there are several factors that come into play when looking at these numbers. With a more globalized world, for example, weather disasters might be reported more than they used to. Improving warning systems and infrastructure might have decreased the fatality rate of these disasters, but doing things like moving into flood zones might have worsened the damage potential. And of course, climate change is making weather disasters stronger, longer, and more often. Death counts and economic damage will also vary from region to region based on how developed an area is. So you can read more about their findings by clicking the link in the source section below. Last week, a Syrian power plant began leaking oil in the Mediterranean. The spill is now covered over 309 square miles, or about the area of New York City. This is the second spill in this region this year, and this region represents 18% of all marine species in the world. People are concerned Syria isn't doing enough to address this disaster, but they also might not be capable of doing enough with there being COVID shutdowns, war, depreciation of its currency, and economic crisis. Quote, "The government only sent teams with sponges and water hoses. They do not have the capacity to deal with this. You cannot clean the sea with sponges." Officials from Cyprus, Turkey, and Israel are monitoring their shores for contamination. The finance minister of Iraq and the International Energy Agency chief urged the global oil cartel OPEC to move towards, or OPEC, OPEC. To move towards renewable energy in a recent OPEC meeting. Iraq is one of the founding members of the 13-country group. The two warned that the current market volatility the group is seeing from the pandemic is just a taste of what they're going to see with climate change. Centralist Democrat Joe Manchin from West Virginia has requested a pause on the infrastructure package, feeling uncomfortable about the price tag and the timing. Because after a hurricane, the last thing we need is help with infrastructure. The Democrats have a goal of finishing this bill by the end of September, so I will keep you posted on how this goes. The EPA released a new report that looks into environmental justice element of climate change. They looked at 6 types of climate impacts among 4 socially vulnerable groups based on income, education, race and ethnicity, and age. The impacts include air quality and health, extreme temperature and health, extreme temperature and labor, coastal flooding and traffic, coastal flooding and property, and inland flooding and property. The report found that Black people are projected to face higher effects of climate change for all 6 impacts compared to other demographic groups. With 2 degrees Celsius of warming, Black people are 40% more likely to currently live in areas with the highest projected increase in extreme temperature-related deaths. The EPA director had this to say about the findings. Quote, "This report punctuates the urgency of equitable action on climate change. With this level of science and data, we can more effectively center the EPA's mission on achieving environmental justice for all." You can read more about their study by clicking on the link in the source section below.